There is a single line in the United States federal budget that almost nobody votes for, almost nobody campaigns on, and almost nobody fully understands. But in 2026, that single expense eclipsed the entire American military, every single soldier, every single ship, and every aircraft combined. That line item is the interest. It is the cost of borrowing what the government already owes, around $1 trillion in 2026, flowing out the door before the country pays for a single new road, hospital, or aircraft carrier. This chart shows exactly where that money sits. The defense budget runs around $885 billion this year, and Medicaid covers tens of millions of Americans at roughly $708 billion. The interest bill is larger than both. The speed of this climb is what catches budget analysts off guard. In 2021, total interest on the national debt was about $352 billion. In just 5 short years, that bill has nearly tripled. Break that down, and the United States pays about $2.8 billion in interest every single day. That is more than most American cities spend in an entire year, gone before lunch, just to service old borrowing. When the government spends more than it collects in taxes, it borrows the difference. It does this by selling treasury bonds. You hand the government money today, and they give you what is essentially an IOU, promising to pay it back later with interest. For more than a decade after the 2008 financial crisis, that interest was practically free. Rates sat near zero, and the country borrowed enormous amounts of money without feeling the immediate financial weight of the debt. Then inflation arrived, and the Federal Reserve pushed interest rates up sharply to fight it. Because government debt constantly matures and gets reissued, old bonds that paid almost nothing came due and were replaced with new bonds paying far more. To see how that traps an economy, you have to look at the mathematical relationship between two variables, R and G. R is the average interest rate on the debt. G is the economy's growth rate. As long as G is bigger than R, a country can carry debt. The burden shrinks over time because the economy outpaces the borrowing cost. That specific mathematical balance is how the United States operated for decades. It masked a structural vulnerability that inflation finally dragged into the open. Budget analysts project that around 2029, those two variables cross over. The interest rate is expected to permanently surpass the economy's growth rate. When that happens, the debt feeds on itself. Rising costs push the deficit higher, requiring more borrowing. Lenders demand higher rates, raising costs again. Economists call this a debt spiral. History suggests we have survived this before. After World War II, a national debt hit 106% of the entire economy, yet America successfully grew its way out. But the post-war debt was a one-time bill. When the fighting stopped, spending collapsed, and a young economy with booming productivity gains easily raced ahead of the interest rates. Today's deficit is structural. It is driven by permanent forces like an aging population and rising healthcare costs, paired with interest costs that compound even when the economy slows down. This means the engine that rescued the country in 1946, rapid growth outrunning a fixed bill, is the exact engine that is failing today. To find enough buyers for an endless flood of new treasury bonds, the government has to make them attractive. And the primary way you attract buyers in the bond market is by offering a higher yield. Those treasury yields act as the foundation for almost every other interest rate in the country. Mortgage rates, car loans, and the rates businesses pay to expand are all priced as a layer directly above what the government pays to borrow. This stacked chart shows how that translates to a typical household. A rate increase of just 55 basis points on a $500,000 mortgage adds roughly $64,000 over the life of the loan. This leads to the concept of crowding out. In any economy, there is a finite pool of savings available for investment. When the government borrows on a massive scale, it competes with private businesses for that capital. Research suggests that for every dollar the government borrows, it absorbs roughly 33 cents of capital that would have otherwise gone to private businesses or factories. This is the deepest cost of the crisis. By pulling capital away from the private sector, it slows the expansion of factories and infrastructure that actually raise worker productivity and living standards over time. Inside the government itself, the squeeze is already measurable. By 2036, projections show that nearly 30 cents of every tax dollar collected will go straight to lenders before any public services are funded. That translates to about $17,000 spent per household every year just to service old borrowing. That money is being committed in your name, leaving less room for everything else. The headlines you see about Treasury yields and national debt numbers are the visible signs of a system shifting under its own weight. The math of interest has moved to the center of the table, and now you can see it working.